Hello my lovelies, hello my darlings. Actually, it's still Thursday. I've just had a look at how much there is left to read, and I might as well continue and get this up ASAP for you, so that the whole series of the zine is out. So here we go. Alternative approaches. A. Deciding on a path. As mentioned above, before a collective opts to take any course of action, they need to decide whether or not the person accused might be able to remain in the group. This will inform whether the approach taken is one based mostly on dialogue or action. There can be no hard and fast rules on this, as every group will be coming at the issue from different angles, and have different understandings of minor and severe harm, depending on the politics of the group, its focus, the experiences of its members, and the personalities and inclinations of those involved. However, a few factors taken together can be used to guide a decision. Reconciliation. The accused remains in the group. The person making allegations desires reconciliation. The collective feels love and or affinity for the accused. The harm caused is relatively minor. The harm is caused through error of judgment. The harm is caused through ignorance. The accused alleges or is known to have themselves suffered relevant hardship or abuse recently or historically, and is believed, see below. The accuser expresses remorse. Expulsion. The person making allegations wants the accused to leave. The collective does not feel sufficient affinity with the accused. The harm caused is severe. There is a pattern of abuse. The accused has not been responsive to dialogue. The accused appears to have been aware that they were crossing boundaries. The accused denies the act or acts, but is disbelieved. See below. The accused expresses no sincere remorse. Okay, we should always be starting from a position of believing the survivor and taking steps to immediately establish their safety. Yet, that does not mean that allegations can never be called into question. One key objective of accountability processes is that the accused acknowledges responsibility for the harm caused without engaging in denial or excuses. Accountability is, in fact, in many cases, seen as synonymous with taking responsibility, which provides no meaningful opportunity for self-defence against those accusations. Processes are not going to invite participation if they are seen to be unfair. So we need to put checks in place to guard against processes which are themselves unaccountable and are vulnerable to misuse and abuse. Some cases are clear-cut, others much less so. You are either with the survivors or you're a rape apologist attitude is unhelpful. While this is an understandable approach given the patriarchal society in which we live, in the UK 7% of reported rapes lead to conviction. Just 7%. It is undeniable that some people, albeit a distinct minority, do make false accusations of various kinds against others. This might be because they have an axe to grind, or because they suffer from a particular mental health problem. It is also true that radical circles can be a magnet for people with such problems due to the more generally supportive culture and our systemic analysis of mental health conditions. We need to allow for the possibility that an accusation may be false, and by diving into accountability processes that require an admission of responsibility, I cannot see any way out for people caught up in such a scenario. Reasons for the collective believing the accused denial should be based on consideration of the overall picture, including their broader patterns of behaviour. having, where appropriate and tactfully, consulted other previous partners about their experience of the accused, other dynamics in the relationship, and consideration, where appropriate, of other previous unacceptable behaviour by the person making allegations. For example, having made other allegations known to be false, inappropriately publishing people's details on the internet, calling the police on comrades, etc. These decisions will at times be very hard to make, but will need consideration if we are to respond appropriately to what are not always straightforward situations. However, no one can be expected to be an expert in this, particularly if oppressive behaviour is a relatively rare occurrence in a collective. Advice may, therefore, be sought from elsewhere, as I discuss further below. B. Mediation. Once it has been established that a person can remain in a given collective and that the imbalance of power is not so great as to undermine it, mediation might then be required in cases still needing external intervention. Friends, the collective and the survivor could recommend this. The scale of accountability processes mean that they are vulnerable to people taking sides and the process erupting into wider conflict in the collective or movement, especially since a lot of groups themselves are small. To avoid escalating the conflict and consuming the energy of a group that probably has other priorities, mediation may be a more suitable, smaller scale alternative. Excuse me. Processes of mediation could be used involving up to 3 people, a skilled and relatively neutral mediator and a support person for each party, rather than accountability processes which tend to create whole support groups on either side. Excuse me. The mediator should promote dialogue and understanding and facilitate an agreement whereby the accused will take steps to change their behaviour in cases where responsibility for an act is acknowledged, as in accountability processes. An example of this could be attending a self-help group below. An agreement could also be made to check in on the progress of this further down the line. C. Self-help groups. Following mediation or independently of it, either party could join a self-help group. For the accused, this may be a condition set by a collective or an agreement reached in mediation. The concept of self-help groups for perpetrators and survivors, for want of better words, could form part of both a preventative and a responsive strategy. Oppression awareness groups. Referrals could be made by anybody, partners, friends, collectives, or the accused themselves, and participation could be for a specified time period, for example 6 months. Others wanting to unlearn patriarchal or otherwise hierarchical behaviour could participate as well. Sessions could be run collectively by participants and a handful of skilled volunteers. In an encouraging, non-judgmental environment, participants could support each other in better understanding power hierarchy and the dynamics of abuse. Like other DIY education projects, text could be read outside group time and discussed during sessions. The goal would be to strengthen our communities by increasing our understanding of power and its abuse, and in turn treat each other with greater respect and comradeship. Individuals who participate may improve their behaviour and at the same time support others in doing so. Teaching others also consolidates our own knowledge and encourages us to be self-reflective. Finally, along with survivor self-help groups, see below, where appropriate, these groups could be consulted in cases where a collective is considering whether to exclude an individual. The group could make suggestions, for example, on the factors to be taken into consideration when making such a decision, or how to go about approaching the accused. With the help of facilitators or counsellors, this would allow perpetrators who remain in collectives to play a positive part in challenging oppressive behaviour, as well as providing checks on the misuse of accountability processes. An advantage of this project is that those who want to and need to work on these issues have a space for doing so without it necessarily dragging in people who would rather get on with other things. The self-help format, meanwhile, is designed to empower people to make change rather than shaming them into it. Again, this approach would only be appropriate for those with whom we have affinity and who we would like to remain in our communities. Survivor self-help. In a similar vein, those who have suffered abusive relationships or experiences could have an opportunity to join forces and support one another. Again, they would not necessarily need to have undergone mediation or any other collective process to access these groups. As with the oppression awareness groups, they could be run by survivors, victims, with the help of skilled counsellors and or other supporters. The project could function as a space for listening, validation, rebuilding self-esteem, learning to identify signs of abuse and manipulation, developing the strength and skills to challenge abuse, and preparing possible ways out of a situation where necessary. Reading homework and self-defense training could potentially be incorporated into these sessions. As with the oppression awareness groups, survivor groups could also act in an advisory capacity to collectives considering how to take an allegation forward. In this way, both survivors and perpetrators can move from being disempowered and constrained by those labels to having the strength and knowledge to feed back into the wider community. Practical problems posed by these groups are issues of capacity for them to function on the local level required for regular communication, and the question of whether there would be sufficient demand, at least in relation to the oppressive awareness groups. I think that the anarchist community in the UK is currently too weak for them to operate locally. It might therefore make more sense to establish one or two groups, for example North and South, or regional groups, and for meetings to assume the form of intensive monthly gatherings bolstered by online communication, such as a mailing list. Funds can be pooled by the group to help towards the cost of travel. Survivor groups may have more demand and might therefore be able to operate in some local areas. Despite some logistical challenges, putting this infrastructure in place may be a worthwhile investment as both a preventative strategy and as a means of building the resilience and political integrity of our networks, as well as guarding against dogmas in accountability processes. D. Internal resolution. Ultimately, our approaches should be geared towards building strong and resourceful individuals who are able to challenge acts of domination where possible through direct communication without requiring the input of the whole collective or project. Establishing resources such as self-help groups may help towards this. E. Exclusion and retribution. In cases where it is not considered appropriate for a person to remain in a collective, action will need to be taken to expel them. The harm caused having been particularly serious, at this point the goal becomes the establishment of safety, demonstrating love and solidarity with the survivor or survivors and helping them to find their power. These principles have been shown to be vital to helping victims overcome trauma. Translating those principles into action will mean expelling an individual in a way that the survivor or survivors are comfortable with. They may not, or they may want to be involved and may want others they particularly identify with to form part of the group that carries it out. For example, other women or people of colour, queer, trans people, etc. One concern is that expulsion does not solve the problem and potentially just passes it onto other groups to deal with. Yet whether or not we see this as a serious challenge depends very much on our objectives. It underscores the importance of being conscious of and flexible in those objectives, from transforming the culprit to empowering victims and establishing safety, and so on. And of not being constrained by the dogmas of different approaches. While expulsion may seem like giving up or passing the problem on to others, we also have many enemies in the world who we wouldn't dream of sharing our spaces with. We need to be watchful of falling foul of the missionary complex. We have no duty to save or transform individuals, particularly if we feel little affiliation with them. We don't think it's worth our while trying to convert cops or judges. So why would we think differently about serial abusers? In demonstrating love and solidarity and helping to empower survivors, the collective or another group, including the survivor, may want to take other actions such as publicly exposing the culprit, attacking their property, or causing them physical harm. The important thing here is that the survivor or survivors are satisfied and given the power and the respect to take action. Again, to avoid getting it wrong, in cases where the perpetrator is a member of the community collective, this should really only be on the cards where the group has reached the decision that the individual cannot be reconciled, i.e. the decision has been carefully considered beforehand. Conclusion. No process is going to be free of pain and distress, but if we are to have some degree of satisfaction with their outcomes whilst minimising their impact on our collectives, we need to forego dogmatism, question our assumptions and objectives, and critically experiment with a range of tools. Okay, now the see below that cropped up a few times there was the further reading. Which I will put up in the comments again. So that's the end of What About the Rapist? An anarchist approach to crime and justice. None of us signed up for anarchy because we love participating in exhausting, interminable processes to address the stupid ways people hurt each other within our subcultural bubbles. When we spend so much time and energy trying to resolve internal conflicts, we risk cutting ourselves off from the passions that brought us together in the first place. Crime Think. Quote. So that's it. Thanks for listening. If you get into any discussions, debates in the comments, please be kind, be respectful. Thanks for listening. Love and light. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.